Raiding is one of the most important things to learn in DayZ, and when done right, it's probably the greatest way to get tons of the best gear. And here I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about stealing other people's stuff so you can roleplay as the British Empire. This guide is designed for solos or duos with no experience, so I get into a lot of useful information here. If you like the video, please leave a like or a subscribe, it genuinely makes a huge difference. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Well, that was a short raid. Before I get into the raid techniques, where I'll give you lots of different ways to actually raid a base, there's a few things you need to know about bases first, as well as some tips and things you need to consider. Bases in DayZ are typically built using fences, gates and watchtowers made of wood or metal, with metal usually being a little stronger. They usually consist of a frame and then panels, and the panels are usually bulletproof. These structures can be locked with 3-digit or 4-digit codes, with the exception of PC, which typically has a digital code lock as a mod. And lastly, there are a few things people can add to them, such as camo nets and barbed wire, which will cut you or make them difficult to see. Now let's focus on where to actually find bases, how to pick the right one to raid, and how to actually raid them. I'll break down the entire process into 6 easy steps so you get thousands of hours worth of experience in a short video. Now, every step here is needed, but steps 5 and 6 are the most important ones, because you'll learn how to actually raid and what to do once you've raided, because this is something even veterans get wrong. Step 1. Start by looking for bases in remote areas like forests, valleys or near small towns. These are generally going to be small walled off areas, sometimes covered with camouflage nets to blend in. The idea is to stay hidden from casual passers-by, so they won't always be obvious at first glance. If you're in a city, make sure to check every nook and cranny. Players are surprisingly good at hiding bases inside buildings, tucking them away behind doors or in corners you wouldn't expect. That said, not everyone is great at hiding their base, and some people just slap them together inside of sheds or open spaces. These kinds of bases make for easy targets, usually having only 1 or 2 walls before you're inside. The bigger the base, the more likely it is to have lots of good loot, but it's also more likely to belong to a group rather than a solo player. That means if the owners return mid-raid, you might have a fight on your hands. Also, any base that looks like it has more than 1 wall doubles the amount of work, so if you're a solo, maybe start off with a single walled base. So for now, let's focus on something more manageable. Step 2. Once you've found a potential target, scout it from a distance using binoculars or a scope. Your first priority is checking whether anyone is inside. You also want to make sure the base hasn't already been raided. Just because a base looks intact doesn't mean it hasn't been looted already. Sometimes people raid a base, take everything and then move on. Double check to avoid wasting your time. I know this step sounds obvious, but some bases are huge and mistakes happen. Step 3. Look for weak points, unlocked gates, unfortified walls, gaps in the defenses. These are all potential entry points that can make raiding significantly easier. This is also the planning stage, where you decide which raiding method you're going to use, and I'm about to tell you a whole bunch of methods you can use, so making the right call here can mean the difference between a quick 10-minute break-in and a 2-hour struggle. Step 4. Pick the right time to raid. The time of day you choose to raid can make a big difference in how the raid plays out. Both night and day raiding have their advantages and drawbacks, so picking the right time depends on your strategy and available gear. Night raiding is a solid choice for stealthy players. The darkness makes it harder for players to spot you, and most players are logged off because most players switch servers during nighttime, meaning bases are less likely to be actively defended. However, raiding at night comes with its own challenges. If it's super dark, you might need a flashlight or night vision goggles to see properly, but using them can make you an easy target. Movement is also riskier since low visibility increases your chances of getting stuck, falling into traps, or missing key entry points. Also keep in mind, if it's a larger base, they might have night vision available to them, which is all kinds of different. Day raiding offers better visibility, making it easier to spot gaps in defenses or weak points in a base's structure. Aiming is also much easier in daylight, which can be a huge advantage if a fight breaks out. Another major benefit is that many players are usually out looting or actually playing the game instead of sitting inside their base, giving you a window to raid without resistance, but there is more of a chance of them coming back than at nighttime. Also, any night vision won't give them any advantage should they have some. The downside is that you'll be much easier to spot, and active players, regardless of if they own the base or not, will respond quickly to any noise, increasing the chances of being caught mid-raid. But what one is best really depends on you. As a first time, raiding during the day is probably better. Step 5. How to actually raid in DayZ. Base raiding in DayZ is all about choosing the right method for the situation. Some methods are fast but loud, while others are slow but stealthy. There's no single best way, only the best way for your current tools, time and risk tolerance. Let's break down the different methods you can use and when they're worth considering. One of the most straightforward ways to raid a base is to use a gun and keep firing into the walls until they're destroyed. This method is relatively quick, taking only a couple of minutes, but it comes with major drawbacks. It's loud, uses up a lot of ammunition, anywhere from 300 to 500 bullets, depending on the caliber it could be more, and guarantees that everyone in the area will know you're raiding, including the infected. There's just no stealth at all, but if you do use this method or any fence breaking method, always focus on the bottom part of the wall. You don't need to take down the entire thing, just the lower section and its frame so you can crawl through. This method is best for when you have plenty of ammo, don't mind attracting attention, and just want to get inside relatively quickly. For a much quieter option, melee weapons like axes or sledgehammers can break through walls, but they take an incredibly long time. You'll be standing there for ages and you'll likely go through several melee weapons before you finally break in, so maybe don't do this one alone. That said, if you have enough time and a few spare weapons, this can be an effective way to get into a base without letting the entire server know what you're up to. It's best suited for patient players who don't mind spending a long time raiding in exchange for keeping things quiet. A good tip for this one is use something like an axe. That way you can bring a few sharpening stones, which can be found in places like outhouses relatively easily. It'll keep your weapon quality up, stopping you from needing one every few minutes. Jumping over obstacles is another way to break into bases, using cars, items, or even other players' shoulders to get over walls. This can be a great way to enter the base, but the problem is getting out. If you don't create an entrance or exit, you'll need to create one when you're inside, so bring a hatchet to dismantle part of the base so you have an exit point. Otherwise, you'll just be trapped. On some servers, jumping on cars or other players is banned, so always check the rules before relying on this method. It's useful in situations where the base has poor positioning but requires a little bit of skill. Crawling through gaps is another effective method, but this also requires skill and patience. Using windows, gaps in the tops of bases, or other unsecured openings can be a quick way to enter that uses no resources and is a preferred method for spur-of-the-moment raids. These gaps aren't always common, but when you find one, they provide a completely silent way in. This makes them useful for stealth raids where you don't want to alert the base owners or anyone nearby. It's always worth checking for gaps before resorting to louder or riskier methods. On vanilla servers, cracking the combination lock on a gate is an option. It's slow and tedious, but it can be done. The best strategy is to start with the middle number and work your way up, since many players favor higher numbers. This isn't always the case, but a good starting point is around 500. Go up first to 999, and if that fails, go down. The other lock takes much longer, but in general, cracking a lock can take minutes or maybe an hour, depending on how lucky you get. It's a frustrating method, but if you succeed, you can not only raid the base but potentially take it over as well. The main issue is you're leaving yourself vulnerable at the gate trying to crack the code, which locks you in an animation, making you an easy kill for anyone passing by. Explosives are one of the most powerful raiding tools in all of DayZ. Grenades work, but you'll need at least a dozen to break down the wall. Plastic explosives, which you can craft yourself, are another option. You'll need 2 or 3 of them to break through. The big downside to explosives is that they're loud and require prep time to gather materials and find a detonator. Also, the moment you set them off, similar to using guns, everyone in the area will know you're raiding, so be prepared for a fight. This method is ideal for well-equipped players who want to breach a base quickly and don't mind making some noise. Gas grenades can be a tactical way to force players out of their base, either so you can shoot them or wait for them to return and ambush them. They fill the surrounding area in a cloud of killer gas that even seeps through walls, so their choice is either leave the base or see the coast. It's a horrible way to go. Another variation of this strategy is simply waiting for the base owners to enter or exit. Since opening a base is one of the most vulnerable moments you experience when operating a base, you can snipe them as they come and go. This is particularly useful when dealing with code locks that can't be cracked manually. However, keep in mind that if a player dies, they may quickly respawn and return, so depending on where their base is located, you may only have 5 or 10 minutes of raiding time before they show up. But the biggest problem is if they have friends, they might log in inside the base itself, since the owner is immediately alerted. So once you start this method, the clock is ticking. One of the most underhanded ways to raid a base is by making friends with the owners and getting them to let you in. This takes time, it's difficult to pull off, and is generally seen as a scummy move, but it's still a valid strategy. If you're patient and manipulative enough, it can work. It's both a wonderful experience for you and a harsh DayZ lesson for them. Never let anyone in your base. The environment itself can be a useful tool too. You can take advantage of things like natural elevation, rocks, and nearby structures to jump over walls or across gaps. Always check the surrounding area before you commit to other raiding methods. Sometimes a well-placed object can save you a lot of effort. Just again, maybe bring a hatchet to escape. There isn't a single best method for base raiding in DayZ, but by understanding all of your options, you can adapt to different situations. Some methods are fast and loud, others are slow and stealthy, and some require a bit of creativity. The best approach depends on what you have available, how much time you're willing to spend, and whether you're prepared to fight once the raid begins. But let's talk about some essential gear you'll need to prepare for a successful base raid, as well as some need-to-know tips. First, as I've mentioned several times, a hatchet is invaluable for dismantling bases from the inside, and it's small to carry. Some raiding methods will get you in but won't create a way out, so being able to break down walls or gates from within can be the difference between a successful raid and getting trapped. A lockpick is another useful tool. It's not always essential, but some players lock interior doors, which can slow you down. If you need to move quickly and quietly, being able to bypass a locked door instead of shooting or smashing it open can make a difference. A gun is absolutely necessary, even if you're not using it to destroy a wall. Most raids don't go unnoticed for long, and there's a high chance of running into defenders, whether it's players logging in mid-raid or returning after hearing gunfire. You'll want something reliable with enough power to fight your way out if needed. Bandages or a few rags are also worth carrying, since you might take damage either from fighting or just general movement, like crawling through barbed wire or misjudging a jump. And just as importantly, and something most people forget, always bring food and water. Raids can take longer than expected and burn a lot of calories, and the last thing you want is to be forced to leave just because you're starving. If you're planning to use a more patient raiding strategy, like waiting for players to open their base, having enough supplies to stick it out can be the difference between a wasted effort and an easy kill. Step 6. What to do after a raid. Raiding the base is only half the job. What you do after can determine whether you actually get away with the loot or end up losing everything. Here's what you need to keep in mind once you've broken in. Be quick. Get in, grab the best loot, and get out. Don't waste time sorting through every single item or sitting inside the base debating what to take. The longer you stay, the higher chance that someone, whether the base owner or just a curious player, will show up to investigate the noise. Even if the base seemed abandoned when you arrived, there's always a chance that defenders could log in at any moment. The faster you move, the better your chances of leaving undetected. Cover your tracks. If you used an exploit or a sneaky method to get in, like jumping through an unprotected gap map. Consider dismantling a wall before you leave. Most players will assume the raiders came through a broken section and will focus on reinforcing that part, leaving the original floor untouched. This means if you want to raid the same base again, you might be able to use the same method without them realizing. Move the loot. You probably won't be able to carry everything in one trip, so planning ahead is key. The best strategy is to set up stashes before you raid so you have secure spots to drop off loot between runs. If the raid was more spontaneous and you didn't prepare, most players just find a nearby bush or hidden spot, dump everything in a pile, and then come back for it later. This is risky, but it's better than running multiple trips fully loaded and getting shot along the way. If possible, mix high value items with lower value ones to make it less of a loss if you get sniped on your way home. Don't brag. This is super important. If you're playing on a server, never tell anyone you raided a base, even if you're proud of what you pulled off. Talking about it will only make you and your base, if you have one, the biggest target on the map. The ones you raided will be looking for revenge, and everyone else will know you've got good gear. Always play dumb. If someone asks if you saw the base get raided, act like you have no idea what they're talking about. Maybe even offer the damaged party a couple of items to get them started if they come by, but mostly staying quiet is the best way to avoid becoming the next victim. But one of the biggest things and the most important thing before you start raiding is to make sure you have a secure place to put them. And to learn exactly how to build a base or how to secure the base you have, click here. And as always, until next time.